Yes, sir. Give you an update. And then have to today.
How old is your son?
He's an 8th grader.
Great. Very good. Coaching,
Okay.
sixth grade daughter, sixth grade.
Okay.
Coach her whole life, never girls and never ever little girls.
Right.
And a blast. They're tougher than any guy, so I tell you, a lot tougher than me, for sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting of the South San Antonio Independent School District Budget Committee meeting will now come to order. The time is 4 o'clock on February 13th, 2020. Michelle, if I may have roll call, please.
Mr. Kevin Rasco,
Present.
Ms. Connie Prado, present. Mr. Gilbert Rodriguez.
President. We can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, Texas Pledge, prayer, and our call to action, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Texas pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Please bow your head in prayer. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity to meet together. Please help us to come together to make this business reflect your kingdom. Breathe life into our ideas and decisions, and help us to build a team that has love and respect at its heart. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Amen. Call to action.
All students enjoy successful education experiences, empowering them to make decisions while enriching their lives and the future they create.
Thank you, everyone. First item on the agenda is citizens to be heard. We have nobody that signed up. So we'll move into discussion and possible action. First item being the teacher incentive allotment. Ms. Lee?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Welcome, everyone. I did want to also acknowledge Mr. Eden Ramirez. So welcome from Mr. Ramirez this afternoon for our budget committee meeting. As you can see, that is not Mr. O'Hanlon. You gotta tell a joke. Yeah, you gotta tell a joke here and there. All right.
Right.
Again.
Preferably not age related.
But welcome everyone, and including any guests that are here this afternoon. Mr. Rodriguez, members of the board and team, the teacher incentive allotment, it's an update for you all. You did receive some background information, potential Q&A questions, and then the latest presentation from the Texas Education Agency. So you had a bit of homework there for you. We just provided a document, just as South San Antonio ISD teacher incentive allotment, and it provides you a guide of timelines for this opportunity, for this incentive for our district. Please note that we did meet the intended letter of intent to the city, to the state Texas Education Agency in January. We did submit the original intent for cohort D. What you have here is an opportunity, and again, these are all subject to adjust and change. If we determine, based on what we have as far as cohort timelines, the opportunity to decide differently on a cohort change, we would have to do that by March 15th. So I'm just going to highlight a few dates for you. Alongside that, you have before you the cohort timelines, cohort A, B, C, and D. And we've had some conversations about the opportunity to prepare and potentially change cohorts from the information that has been provided. I'm not going to read specifically, but you do have those timelines there before you. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm sorry, is this document here? No? My apologies, I thought we had that. Mrs. Prado, I think Mr. Raskow has it, thank you. And Mr. Luis. Thank you. So we do have the timelines there that we can consider, and then of course the potential opportunity to intend to change cohorts before March 15th. If you take a look at the second page, there is a district TIA team training scheduled for February 25th of this month at the Education Service Center. The Service Center has partnered with the TEA to provide some additional guidance and support through this process. They designated five seats face-to-face along with the remote opportunity. So we actually have 2 teams that will be a part of that, the face-to-face and of course here at our district as well. There are still some unanswered questions, opportunities for us to dialogue with the TEA, seek clarity, and to ensure that the plan that we develop is the plan that is in the best interest of our teachers. Alongside with that, you will be receiving some additional updates as we continue with this. And then of course, I have no doubt that the Texas Education Agency will continue to increase the questions under the frequently asked questions as the months continue on that end. Reverting back to page 1, cohort D does have an application that will be posted in November, and then you'll see the dates that the submittal process would continue. Based on this is why we feel that we may be able to consider cohort B or C in due time, and we'll definitely come back to notify the committee if we consider one of those 2 as an opportunity based on one, the timeline and the amount of work we have to get done.
Right.
So again, please note, the intent was completed, and any change will be done prior to March 15th on our end. So just really an update for you of where we are, and more specifics to come to you all as the weeks continue through this process.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a reason why do we not feel that we could make the cohort A or B? And that's why we're going with C or D?
Cohort B, Mrs. Prado, actually cohort B is quite favorable for us. When the conversation for submittal, we wanted something submitted because the TEA will be providing the district cohorts here in the next month or so. Again, this was just for us to ensure that we did have the intent to do, and we went with that cohort at that time.
Okay.
So there's definitely, I can tell you that cohort A, by far, from what I know, and I'm sure even Mr. Brasso can speak, San Antonio Independent School District, from what we understand, are at the front of the line. So it's a small number that is considering cohort A because they've had existing plans in place with the incentives that they had in place prior to. So they're a little ahead of us on that end. The great thing about it is that we do have parts of those elements already in place that would be very favorable for us to consider cohort B. So it is a difference of a few months, as you can tell, on the submittal process and the ongoing notification and just where we are with this, and then of course the flow of funding alongside there. Realistically, I could not tell you that we would be ready to consider cohort A at this time. Yes, ma'am.
No, that's, thank you.
Mr. Roscoe, any other questions? I have a question, if
Yes,
I
sir.
may, Madam Superintendent. So payout September 21 or September 22. So we want to attract high-quality teachers for the incoming school year, right? So do we have a plan in place or something that we're going to have a discussion about, or you're having a discussion currently with your staff to try this, not wait for this to kick in and try to get high-quality teachers?
Absolutely, sir. Thank you for asking. We do have some pre-work that needs to be in place prior to the 25th of this month as well. along with the specifics of the planning process. There are specific checklists that have been provided by the TEA as well to prepare for this. So yes, to answer that. The other is really also the opportunity to retain the teachers we have, and not so much just the attraction of that, the opportunity to put in place a plan that will incentivize the opportunity of even the teachers that we currently have would really be a priority for us to ensure that we can keep the teachers on that end. So I would say we would want the plan to both retain and attract
Yes, ma'am.
through the process of
Yes,
this.
No, I entirely agree. You're absolutely correct. Thank you for that. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I did want to also share that I know that Mr. O'Hanlon and the team and having a conversation with Mr. Ramirez, I know that they're also working on providing support through this process, so that conversation has also been going on as well.
I don't think this item requires any action, so we will go to item number 2, consideration of all budget amendments. Ms. Alejo?
Yes, sir. So we do have, Mr. Rodriguez and trustees, we do have the proposed February 19th budget amendment for your review, and you've had just a bit of time to review it as well. I'm sure there are some preliminary questions that we can share with you. Prior to that, if at all possible, we do have the team here, Ms. Clarita, Mr. Doucet, along with Mr. Bonk, to provide us that overview and some additional specificity that may clarify some of those questions prior to that piece. So do you allow us that?
Yes, ma'am.
Get that started. And Dr. Gropo is going to kind of spirit up.
Is that for your signal? Well, on or about December 10th, after significant number of discussions of exactly where we stood at that point in time, what we realized was we didn't know exactly where we stood at that time, and we needed to take some rather drastic actions, I would say, because I've never really done this in my time, but we didn't exactly put on a budget freeze. You might say we put on a budget chill. We did not entertain anything really new during the last couple months. Of course, if a person left the district, they were replaced after due consideration for that position. But we put the team together, superintendent leading the team in weekly meetings. We gave a really thorough, hard look at the 6,100, the personnel costs, salaries and salary costs, to be sure of two things. One, that we had ample resources allocated to pay the salaries, and B, that we had them coded in the right fund and function where they need to be, and we found some challenges in both those efforts. It's my observation, at least at this time, that staff has done an excellent job of putting us as close to the finish line as we might reasonably have expected. I wrote this, like I said, on or about December 10th, and I projected a goal of considering it on February 13th. Just so happens that we're here today on February 13th. There are still a few things remaining to do. We all know that some changes needed to be made, but we have made them. The staff has done a great job with them. We're trying to really keep moving forward. We talked about flying. You can't fly, run. You can't run. Walk fast. You can't walk, crawl, but keep going forward. I think they're tired of hearing me talk about that, but we are going forward, and they've done a really good job of moving forward. have. We'd like to go ahead and present what we have and then take your questions if that meets with your approval. So Sherry, want to take a shot at talking a little bit about what we did with personnel?
What we started off doing is we broke it down by fund and function, and we looked at every staff member, ran the list of every staff member that was in that fund and function and what their annual salary was. We also compared it with what was budgeted to make sure that we were on track. We pulled any vacancies that we have or had at the time, and just to make sure that everything that we're hiring for that's on our vacancy list that we're advertising for, that those items were budgeted. And we've been pretty close. There was, I think there might have been a couple of areas that, you know, depending on whether or not they're hired, then, because, you know, sometimes we expect someone who has, I don't know, 15 years of experience and they don't, or vice versa. We are expecting, you know, 10 years of experience, which is what we kind of average, but we got somebody with 25 years of experience. And so there's a little bit of fluctuation, I guess, within the actual amounts. But we went through, like I said, and compared it with what was budgeted, and we seem to be pretty close to not having to do too many changes within that. But then we also looked at how people were coded, and some of the changes that we had to make were, of course, changes to the program intent codes that were mandated by the state. We had some of those to do, but then also looking to see, and looking at our FAR guide to determine, is the person in that position, is that the best code for them? And some of them we were changing, some of them we said, well, maybe, maybe not, and we still have a little ways to go, but everything that we've been going through, like I said, by fund and function, then we're pretty happy with what's occurred so far, what we've been finding. So we still have more to go, but it's just a little piece at a time.
Joe?
Go ahead. I'm going to wait till you're done.
I'm happy to let you jump in.
I'm going to wait till you're done. I'll keep a note here.
Good afternoon.
It's growing, Joe.
I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, and I will try not to replicate what Dr. Grovel has said, but I do want to talk about the revenue portion of our budget as it sits at this point. And I will echo his comments about staff. We have had 2 meetings, I guess, that have included Denise Orozco, Dr. Ruben Carrillo, David Abundis, the 2 people to my right, Mr. Vino and Mr. Doucette, and Sherry as well, and Seaman. And I am pleased to see a group that will sit shoulder to shoulder and agree on things as we move forward. And I hope that we can stand united with this committee as we bring these data pieces forward. And everybody kind of nod in unison as to where we are, because that's not always the case that we can agree on where we are. I think we all want to get to the same spot, but being in the same spot currently is very important. The 4 elements that our revenue is based on, and we will talk about this at each and every budget meeting. First and foremost is the students. I was talking to Mrs. Dale the other day, and it's a matter of counting the belly buttons that are present. If the belly button is not in the seat, they can't learn. We know that, but they also can't generate the revenue. So our student population, their individual characteristics, and certainly their attendance are critical. So that gets rolled up into ADA. The second element is our tax collections. We don't establish our property values. We do set a tax rate as a district with some constraints, but our tax collections are a critical part of our revenue stream. Probably the third most important is our compensatory education numbers. And yes, they are part of our student populations, but they are such a strong revenue driver, and we will see that as we go on in the discussion. And then the state values, we talk about local property taxes, but we also look at state property values that are determined by the comptroller's office, and it's completely different than what is determined by the central appraisal district. And the reason the state values are important is because that's what determines our local share, what we should be contributing as a district. And then the state comes in on top of that and shores our revenue up. But the elements that I want to focus on today are the student numbers, specifically the ADA numbers and the comp ed numbers. We will talk through that, and you will see. Now, when we adopted the budget back in late August, we were working on projections. There is no one that is clairvoyant that knows exactly how our student numbers are going to finish. We have taken real-time data, if you will, a point-in-time data, and have used that. But we know there will be changes as we move forward, hopefully not as drastic as we've seen. The question was asked, do we anticipate the same drop in the second semester? And absolutely, we do not, for lots of reasons that I would touch on. But the data folks, Mr. Roscoe and Dr. Carrillo, have been awesome in providing data. They've asked tough questions, they've answered tough questions to get us where we are right now. So if you look at this sheet right here, it's the green bar sheet. And I guess I chose the color green because that's the color of money. But
Baylor School.
oh, goodness. Okay, so refined ADA, that's all the students that we have in school subject to their applicable attendance rate. So if we have 8,000 students and every one of them show up every day, we're going to have a refined ADA of 8,000. If we have a lagging attendance percentage, so again, attendance is important from a monetary generation standpoint, but also from a learning standpoint. And I won't read each one of these, but if you'll look in the right column, anything that's parenthetically referenced in red is a decrease, and I'll hit on the high points in a minute, but that's just the variance. The areas that are in green are some things that I had questions about. Do we have these students? And so we verified that through our PEIMS department that we don't until you get down, like the bilingual ADA, both dual immersion and non-LEP. We will have some students coded into those categories next year, but not in the current year. That's a House Bill 3 initiative. And then the CCMR educationally disadvantaged grads, the non-educationally disadvantaged grads, and the special education grads, those are outcome-based, and we won't know what those numbers are until we finish the year. We will be funded on those. It's not a great amount of funding, but it does recognize the challenges that are experienced in those categories. And then a little bit further down, the percentage of recognized teachers, exemplary teachers, and master teachers, that is part of that TIA, that identification of our great and highly skilled educators. And then the number of full-time employees and part-time employees. We do employ part-time individuals in this district, but by and large, they are instructional aides, tutors, things of that nature that are all paid for with federal funds, so they don't go into the general fund calculation. So if you will turn the page there, the next page is titled Variances from Initial Projections, okay? We had originally estimated that we were going to have 7,753 refined ADA. Well, as of the date of this report, that encompasses really the first 4-6 weeks, our ADA is 7,594.65 for a variance of 159.1 kids. Okay, if you don't think that ADA matters, look at the next column of impact. The reduction for these are not kids that are lost. We just forecast a greater number than we had experienced. 159 students less than what we had originally projected results in a loss of $1,042,000 revenue. So again, it's not that we lost it because we never had it, but it's not going to come in. So it's important that we budget accordingly. The comp ed data. Y'all have heard that there's a new method for calculating our comp ed enrollment, which is our economically disadvantaged students. Formerly, it was anybody that qualified for free or reduced lunch. When y'all made the decision to go with the community eligibility provision, or CEP, everybody in the district qualified for comp ed. Well, now if you look at our comp ed numbers, they fall into census blocks, and this has to do with nothing other than the address in which they reside. Okay, so you take a student, you look at their GIS code, you see where they live. If they happen to be homeless, you use the address of the school, but each residence in our district or outside of our district, if they transfer in, falls within a census block. And so they get assigned there, and then they're given a weight from there. So whereas a comp ed kid formerly was 2.0, now they're anywhere from 2.25 up to 2.75. So again, we compare very favorably. We are very heavily economically disadvantaged by census block. But where you see the variance there, we had coded no students, or we had estimated there were no students to be found in census block 1, and we estimated that a lot of students would be found in census block 5. And so, again, the red means that there are fewer students than we estimated to be there. The black means there are more students. But the net change in the total is 414 students less that qualify for comp ed funding. And what does 414 students, or what do 414 students less in compensatory education qualification result in? It's a revenue shortage of $793,000. So you look at those two together, you're over 1.8 million. And then our bilingual identification, we were 159 shorter than we estimated. Dyslexia, we're 6 shorter than we estimated. And the early education, which is our students K through 3 that are educationally disadvantaged, y'all recall the legislature sought to fund full-day pre-K, and they are absolutely doing that. But the funding mechanism is actually early education, which is K through 3, and if they happen to be ELL, they are counted, in addition to being educationally disadvantaged, if they are also ELL, they count as 2 students. So lots of number crunching that have gone on there, and you know, House Bill 3 may be completely replaced 2 years from now, but we're still going to be learning about it 5 years from now. But it's it's a bear. There's not really any other way to say it. But the early education adjustment is about $158,000, and then there are various and sundry other adjustments, just a few dollars here, a few dollars there, that roll up into that other $185,000 for a total of almost $3 million of revenue that we originally forecast. That we, as of today, we don't feel like we will realize that revenue. One other item of note, the next page is spending requirements by program and Camco. It was not long ago that we sat in this boardroom and heard from our auditors that we had an issue with our efforts regarding our required expenditures. So in an attempt to close the gaps there, the same group that I mentioned a while ago, which I think are absolutely the right people on the bus, we have identified the individual allotments and also noted the required spend, what we have allocated, or what we have currently allocated versus our required spend. And I'm sorry, the estimated allocation is the total money generated in those categories. The required spend subjects it to the required spend percentage. You'll see our current budget and then any required adjustments that we have to make. You'll see that our comp ed budget, we're going to have to adjust it by just short of $715,000. Now, that's not part of the amendments that you see today, because we want to look and see if perhaps those dollars are allocated somewhere else that we can recode. And it's not a matter of doing it for the purpose of compliance, it's doing it for the purpose of supporting those kids. If there's not enough dollars supporting those kids, we'll make an adjustment. You see that we're required to spend 55% of comp ed, 55% of the $12.6 million. Well, 45% of that is about $5 million that we're not required to spend, but it is available, and we need to ensure that we're educating our students and providing those opportunities. So that is our revenue in a nutshell. This is not the last adjustment you'll see, but I feel like it's important, because we went into the budget cycle with a little bit of unknowingness as it related to House Bill 3. We feel a lot more comfortable with it now, but we know there will be additional adjustments.
I'd like to just add a little bit on to that. A huge part of what Jeff was just talking about is attendance, obviously. Dolores and I talked about this on multiple occasions, of getting our attendance percentages up. Let's be nice and say we're at 92%. We're really not quite there, but we really should be 94 or 95%. Mo Casey have initiated a staffing study for the district to see where we are, to begin with, our ratios and so forth at the high school staffing, which is a study we've done in a couple dozen or more districts in the state, for like 30 some. We're also doing an academic data review, a part of which shows the impact of absenteeism on academic achievement. And then we will do another study in a couple months when we get those done that will address 26 factors in the district dealing with what the students bring to school with them every day in their data backpack, is the way we talk about it. And a big part of that study has to do with student absenteeism and teacher absenteeism. And I'll warn you in advance, the numbers are not pretty anywhere. We did a high school in the eastern part of the state. I won't name the school, but we found that 42% of their students were chronically absent. Chronic absenteeism for a student is 10% of the days missed. So that's 17 or 18 absences for whatever reason. If they're playing in the state championship basketball game, they're still absent. Another piece that we have begun looking at is teacher absenteeism. And our standard for teacher absenteeism in chronic absence situations is 10 days. And the same school that had 42 students chronically absent had 74% of their teachers chronically absent. The lowest number we've seen on teacher chronic absenteeism is 51%. So when we produce those numbers, don't be shocked. Everybody is having a little bit of a problem with that. Part of it's due to the fact that we're allowing them to do professional learning activities on school days and other things on school days that the board may, at its pleasure, want to look at some policies. I haven't reviewed those policies. I don't know what they say right now, but I will before we talk about it any further. But I just wanted you to be aware of those things because they impact the budget, and they also are going to give you some insights into your staffing levels and also some insights into how attendance impacts your students. And with that, we have two experts. Jeff said it was to his right, but it looks like it's left to me, who will respond to your questions, or any of us will respond to your questions. You got a minute to do that.
What'd you say?
Committee members, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I'll start.
How many pages?
No, not even half. I have a question for Ms. Seaman, I think. I know you all are still working on the analysis of the different positions and the staffing. When do you anticipate finishing that?
We haven't hit 11 yet.
I know it's a lot of work.
The big one, because we're in with everything else with the audit and some other things we have going on in HR. We're trying to fit it in so that we don't drop anything else in the normal due dates that we have. We usually meet, we didn't meet last week, so
This week coming up, we have
four, in which we already had those, the
Freshly
information.
voted, yes.
And so I'm trying to remember, what do we have about?
3 or 4, with those 4 got beat, so maybe we're like halfway.
I would say March.
Okay, so the biggest one is going to be the instruction.
Yes, ma'am.
And we might have to break that one down into a couple of sections.
But for sure before the end of the budget year.
Oh, definitely. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes. I was thinking like if you wanted a date, like how many weeks from now?
Oh, no. I know
Oh, no, yeah, no, definitely.
But all right, yeah.
Yeah,
Because we'll
we will-
start, our budget workshop, we're going to start pretty soon, I would think. So, you know, to have good numbers would help us a lot as well. All right, Ms. Seaman, that was the only question I had for you. Jeff, you had mentioned that one of the questions was on the loss of student enrollment and the cost to us. And you said that it's not, it's just a one-time, we don't anticipate that same loss for the second semester?
That's correct. And these numbers go in almost to the end of the 4 to 6 weeks. And we'll talk about the budget calendar in a little bit, but we'll see that we're requesting that this committee meet every 6 weeks. And I'm not pleased that you're seeing such a sharp adjustment today. The numbers are going to be what they're going to be, but at the same time, if we monitor this by 6 weeks, and we absolutely should, and we should discuss it, and you know, hopefully a year from now, when we're sitting here with the same adjustment, you know, we're saying, yeah, we talked about that last 6 weeks, and we knew this was coming. So
adjustments should be made, like you recommended, every 6 weeks or so, not just one big adjustment like that.
if not a full-blown adjustment, then at least the conversation. So we don't want to burden staff with continue, because I mean, how frequent could you do it? You could do it daily if you wanted
Yeah,
to,
that's
right?
true.
But conversationally, we need to be talking about this, and certainly the mid-year adjustment makes a lot of sense, but I'm not sure that a quarterly adjustment might not be warranted.
As long as we're at 92% or something like that, I think it needs more attention than you would normally give it. 'Cause
I agree. Well, I'm
it's-
happy to hear that I was concerned that we're going to have to come up with another large amount like that at the end of the...
There will be a little bit of a change in the 5 to 6 weeks, and typically it's not a positive one, although last year, the last 6 weeks was higher than the fifth 6 weeks, but it won't be anything approaching that at all.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Part of what we did, part of what the staff did, they'll gladly tell you, they kept me out of the way and so things went pretty smoothly, is we really kind of redid the budget. So this was what you would have seen in a normal circumstance. You might have seen this estimate very early in the year as opposed to February 13th. So just that.
And the comp ed reduction, the 414 comp ed students, if we have to deliver the message that we've lost another 414, I won't be here to deliver it. So that is as of snapshot date, which occurs in October.
Okay.
And so there could be some minor changes based on us getting updated student records, but we're not going to see another 414 students.
And as he said, if it's 414, believe we'll both be gone.
That's good to know. Dr. Brokel, I know you all are working at a staffing study at the high school. Has that already started, and do you know how long that will take to complete that?
Well, the staffing study actually started yesterday.
The answer is yes.
I could just say yes,
Yes.
but the whole
Take it a little more.
truth is, we had our first phone call today with the high school principal and others, superintendent and others, and I have asked for, asked is a kind of word, we'll have that by the end of March.
Oh, okay, good.
Hopefully a little earlier than that, but let's say end of March.
The reports, Jeff, are very telling, and that's a lot of information, and I thank you, and I thank Gladys and Chad, because it's a lot of work that you all put into this. We've never had, this is the first time I see something like this. We've never had this before. So it's surprising, because you're looking at all these zeros, and you're like, whoa, what's happening? But you've explained it very well, so I understand what's happening here.
It's been pointed out that you haven't had the opportunity to see detailed budget information maybe in a year or two. You'll be asked to approve the high-level document that you've been approving, but you'll have access to the detailed document.
Good, because you're right, we've never had access to a detailed budget. We have 2 pages, that's what we got at the end of the year, and that was it.
I'll bring you one of my Dallas notebooks if you like. You'll have to help me carry it.
Which reminds me, Ms. Adele, would you remind the auditors to make sure and send those out at the end of the year? This is bound copies to everybody, a bound copy.
The bound copy for, I see what you're.
I have a copy for
The audit?
Oh, Chad, do you have?
I have it.
Okay, I was
Okay,
gonna say,
I
wow.
have
I know we have.
okay,
We'll get yours today.
okay, that's all I have to say.
If I may, I just have
Yes, sir.
Can you give me an idea, what is the fund balance amount required that we're required to carry by TDA?
Yeah,
That has numbers.
TDA has no requirement for a school to have a fund balance, okay? It impacts things such as your credit rating if you're in good debt, but there is no requirement to. Now, there are all kinds of things. The first rating is fraud with requirements for fund balance. A typical target, if a district has 3 months operating expenditures, in our case, about 21,750,000, give or take, that is a healthy fund balance. But there are districts, if you look out there, that will carry 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, and you get into a situation if you've got needs. You know, I mean, I can have hundreds of dollars in the bank, and if my kids need shoes, I need to spend it. But
And happily, the district has, I believe I'm right in saying, always talked about 3 months. And we have done, numbers, we in most cases have done numbers for the district for several years. You've always been in pretty good shape.
If I remember from the audit report, we said our fund balance at the time was sitting around 143 days of operating expenses.
I was concerned because this represents about a fifth of the fund balance, this adjustment, so I just want to make sure it's still going to be healthy in case things come up in the future.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you, Mr. Roscoe. I just had a couple of, 2 questions actually. One, you mentioned the chronic absenteeism, right? How granular do we get when it comes to what street, what area, what school, and do we tie that into missed bus routes, late bus routes? You know, how granular do we get to the extent that can we do something to help that? Or is it just parents aren't getting their kids to school?
Well,
Meaning like if there's a certain area where we identify absenteeism and maybe there's a bus route that doesn't go through there, or a late bus route that's consistent in going through there that the kids don't make it to school.
let me tell you something you don't know first. Granularity is his middle.
Okay.
And that goes back between us for a while. But when we get those numbers,
Okay.
and we get them ready to act on, I'm going to recommend to the superintendent that we pull campus people together, show them the numbers, and give them their improvement opportunities as part of the campus improvement plan. Superintendent takes that recommendation, fine, if she doesn't, don't cry. They got to do it that way. But if we don't, I'd be surprised if we don't cover the district with bus routes, but I'm not that familiar yet with the district, with that level of granularity in the district. But yeah, we got to leave no stone unturned on that. I'll give you an example. The Bucksville district, when Casey went there to do some work, we found that they had at the high school, they had some problems. We were surprised, frankly. They were what we call special causes. They were over 2 standard deviations from the norm in the district. And the campuses both said, well, there's nothing we can do about that. And I said, but you have to do something. And we investigated causes for absences. That's pretty easy to do. And what we found was they were using suspension tools, suspension and expulsion, for a discipline tool that they were having kids miss school more times than you could really imagine. And it's not why you have suspension and expulsion as a discipline tool. We went through this in Dallas as well, but there are a number of things we can look at, but we need to get some data and do a little research and then turn, particularly the high school campuses, loose on fixing. Will be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez, I
Yes,
will
ma'am.
tell you, need to recommend that we have Valentine's every week, because our attendance this week has
Right.
been
Right.
quite favorable.
Right.
And when I say that, I'm looking at 94%, I'm thinking, wow, this is great. So it's just other opportunities that we can consider as we.
And then like incentivizing, yeah, and I know that's the staff and the superintendent, maybe incentivizing, if you're in school all day, or, some type of reward or whatever, but thank you, I'm glad that we are gonna get that data and formulate some type of plan to address it, right? 'Cause like,
We have data, but we need to analyze and
yes, sir.
put a little dressing on that.
Yes, sir.
Then start to work on it a little deeper. I don't mean to say we don't have that.
Yes, sir. And then my second observation was I heard you mention coding a couple times, and I know it appears to me that we're shifting a lot of our current practices into best practices, right? Some things that we were doing before, we probably should have been doing a different way to be more efficient. And regarding the coding and PIMS, are we identifying or have you identified opportunities for training or getting more knowledge to make sure that we don't have to go back and do that recoding shuffle?
Well, as it relates to PIMS coding, which is, sometimes different than personnel coding, that's really the issues that we have with personnel and functions, but they're not in here, so I'm not ashamed to tell you that our PIMS folks are as good as I've seen in 15 years. I think, we're strong.
Okay.
We really are.
Okay.
And when we have our discussion, it's great to see the collaboration. And there's no one person that has every answer, but between the group, we get all the things answered. It's awesome.
Great.
We'll invite you sometime.
Okay.
Thanks, girl.
Well, at the superintendent, and if my calendar allows for it, not legally.
That's a really good question on PIMS. I would estimate, and I don't think I'm exaggerating here, that PIMS clerks, that position, make anywhere from 12,000 to 175,000. So some of those folks may not be the most skilled people in Texas. And when we go in districts, it is not unusual to quickly recognize that there are PIMS submission issues. And let me see. I think I'm right in saying that there have been times when the TEA was withholding as much as $6 billion of money that should have belonged to districts if the PIMS reports had been correct. Joe Wisnowski told me that, not Kevin O'Hanlon, so I think it's right.
You remember Monopoly, when you get the bank error in your favor and they give you $10.
Right.
That's, TEA doesn't do that. When it's the bank error in your favor, they just keep it. So
Gotcha.
it's critical. It's critical to have the right reporting data in there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
If we weren't coding correctly, we would see some huge variances here. But it's always a point of emphasis. We always need to ensure that's good.
It's really important, but man, you'd be surprised how many problems are common to almost all of this. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Shame on us in education for not being able to correct them. I will say one more thing. You gave me an opening there on the training. On element mapping that we need, if we can ever get past these high hurdles, that we need to work on with your staff is training them on professional leadership skills. I'm talking business on this now. Everybody gets reasonable training on job skills, but these guys and others deserve to be trained on leadership skills as well. criticizing anyone except me for not having gotten it. And that's something I love to do, so it's near to my heart. And we'll have some conversations with superintendent in the near future about how we can work on that and that's our choice.
Great, no, I'm glad to hear that, and thank you for everyone for the tremendous work. I know it's a lot, so.
Say it again.
Thank you for, thank you, everybody who's doing all the hard work. You know, I know it's not easy, there's a lot going on, so, you know, but it is important, and I appreciate everybody's effort. So, yeah, any more questions on the amendment?
One short one.
Yes, sir.
Just an easy one. Where is our percentage attendance roughly for the district sitting at right now?
About 91.
91 with a goal of around 94,
Yes, sir.
91,
95?
92.
Yes.
So not terrible, but
No,
we're
could be better.
Fifth 6 weeks last year and sixth 6 weeks were both 90 point something. An urban high school gets 85 to 88 on a bad side. So we're just too close to that. And I am not criticizing South San Antonio fast when I say that. It's just a fact. We got to face it. We got to improve it. Yes, sir.
Mr. Rasco, about 5 weeks ago, in one of the weeklies to you, there is a 10-year ADA analysis that you received. So it provided you data by 6 weeks for the last 10 years of our history of our district. And that is where Dr. Gropel, Jack, and I had conversations about we really need to consider a study and understand, you know, potentially those granular areas that we can really hone down on with the specificity to every campus and the needs based on that, to really tell the story behind the, exactly. Yes, sir. So we're on that.
Would you like for them to have a copy of that?
I can. We can share it.
sure, I could just recall it off the top. of my
Yes,
head.
it's been a little bit, but
Michelle will be back with you in just a
you
minute.
probably will.
Well, I sent her with it.
Thank you. That's all.
Ms. Crowder, you had?
Yeah, I do. I wanted to kind of comment on, Kevin, you had asked about what is required by TEA, and I think Jeff said there is no requirement. And we've always known that, but because TEA has a habit of keeping the microscope on South San, always it seems, we've always been, try to be as fiduciary responsible as we can be to show that we are responsible and we're going to have a healthy fund balance. So we always try to keep 3 months. Could we go down to 2 months? Absolutely. And we'd still be okay as far as we're concerned. But in the eyes of TEA, and when we tried to open these schools, that's the first thing he told us was they're going to bankrupt this district. They're opening the schools again. When in fact we have a healthy fund balance. So that's the reason we've always kept it as 3 months. To show them that we're not bankrupting our schools, that we can be responsible, and we're going to have 3 months. Other districts, I see them come out every month. There's some districts that actually only have 2 months.
Sure.
Because I've seen them in their reports. But we just want to show TA that we're doing our job, we are responsible. And if it wasn't for them always keeping an eye on us, I think we may go down to 2 at some point.
So they're doing a good job.
But I think, you know, until all this is over with, I think we need to keep it at 3 months.
Sure.
Or try to at least
Sure.
keep it.
No, you should. Y'all done a good job. I've looked way back in Joe's records on your fund balance. It's been good for a long time. There are people that I know who have had as much as 16 to 18 months fund balance.
In James Clear's Atomic Habits, he says that we don't ascend to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
Yeah.
And if we've got good systems, and it's, you know, there are 7 people making the decision on fund balance. And we've got an item on our budget calendar about approving fund balance assignments that you know, we need to make that an annual occurrence, not less than annual occurrence. it'll be exactly where you guys want it. Set some policy around that, just amongst your board. And it needs to be what you guys want it to be. What makes sense to y'all. This is South San Antonio School.
Absolutely, but I think you understand where we're coming from. As long as we have that shadow over us, we kind of feel like if we go below the 3 months, then we're going to get dinged, or they'll question why are we dipping so far into our fund balance.
Sunshine's just around the corner.
I would hope so. It's been over a year, so I would hope so. And I did, Ms. Sendejo was,
Yes.
we set the agenda, and she shared with me our monthly budget reports that your department came up with, and I was really pleased to see it. And I don't think the budget committee was privy to this, right? But it's coming up to the board. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that the percentage that expended, I thought it was going to be more. But you're doing very well, and the staff is doing well in trying to keep it, at less than 50% on most of the accounts. There are a few that have hit 50, maybe a couple of hundred.
Put up sooner than.
So, yeah, so I was really pleased to
Thank
see
you.
that. Yeah, really pleased to see that. So just wanted to mention that. Budget committee. And this is our,
Yes, ma'am.
wow. Let's bring out the balloons and the candy. Every week.
Right.
Wow.
So just really, the reason for that sharing a few weeks ago is just, again, typically like to share some insight, historical data trends analysis that allow you to take some time to reflect and understand the history of our district. And I enjoy numbers just in general, so I hope that you do too.
Sure.
It helps us make, informed decisions, absolutely.
Well,
Mr.
and I will tell you, Mr. Rodriguez, oftentimes when we, actually every time we come together as a team, I share with our staff the importance of what our data and the backup and how it assists us to be able to share with you the clarity and the understanding, and that it's not something that we're generalizing, because I'm not big on that to begin with, but really show, hey, what does that really look like? So are we talking, I used this one several times this week, 2 or 75? I mean, it's a difference. And that helps, so we hope that
No,
we'll
it really-
continue
it really
this way
is.
to share this information with you.
No, perfect segue into my last question was, if I could, were you able to, the clarity on the 51, on the 5100, on the 50, function 51, the question that I submitted regarding the
Yes, sir.
1.1, are you able to elaborate on that? a
Sir, if
little?
you look at the handout,
Yes, sir.
it's included in there.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
And this one?
The amendment that I passed.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. If it's in there, I'll take a look at that. Any more questions on the
No.
amendment? Are there any other amendments that we need to review? No? What I'd like to do then is just get a consensus from the budget committee that we could put forth this recommendation to the full board to adopt the budget amendment. But I'd first like to ask Ms. Sendejo if she's good with that, if your recommendation is to put it forward to the full board for consideration and approval.
Definitely, sir. Again, with the efforts of staff, and I know oftentimes you hear Dr. Gropel and Mr. Bond share the efforts of the district in general, but please know that they're also a big component to that and have provided some guidance, and it helps dearly on that. And so definitely my recommendation to recommend this amendment to you and full board.
So
Was there another handout or something on the 51? Or is it in one of these?
It's attached, yes, ma'am. It's in the, that one that I passed out. It should be the second page to it.
Of the questions?
No, ma'am.
Of the budget?
There it is.
Yes.
Of this one?
Yes, ma'am. It's the
Oh, okay,
second page
in
of
the
that
blue?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but budget committee members, without objection, we'll put this forward to the full board to recommend to approve. No objection? Ordered. Thank you, Ms. Sendejo.
Yes, sir.
So we'll move on to item number 3, investment training update. Ms.
Yes.
Sendejo?
We are excited, we're pleased that we did have two of our staff members, Ms. Clarita and Mr. Doucette, this week. In conjunction to everything, they were out in training, so they are investor experts. But I'm hoping that they can share just a little bit there. And again, it was just an update for us to ensure that we were in the right track as we come forward with potential opportunities for those investment opportunities for the district. Chad?
Great.
Brought back memories of government accounting. I will say that. If you ever get a chance to be an investment officer somewhere, I would highly recommend you don't. Just kidding. It was good training. It was more geared toward municipalities and port authorities, that kind of stuff, because of the amount of funds they deal with. But did apply to the school district quite a bit. So I learned a lot. Took some good notes. Unfortunately, I showed up without a notebook prepared. More on that. But Ms. Clarita highlighted quite a bit of stuff, and we'll take this next week and discuss that between ourselves and with the other staff members too. But it was good training. It was really great.
The overall goal was also for me to attend, and just for timeline purposes, in the best interest, we did commit Ms. Clarita and Chad, and I'm scheduled in.
Awesome.
I hear that you come into, I asked Chad, and he said, how do you go? Because I lost all my hair. Oh, I lose my hair? I'm sure it'll definitely be a benefit, bring a better perspective once we discuss those investment allocation opportunities for us.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that meet the requirement? It was done because of the requirement that we had to have
That
this.
is correct. The investment officer in a given district must receive 10 hours of training within the first 12 months of the job. And then there are ongoing CE requirements. I'm super proud that we have two people that have taken that certification, and we'll rely on their expertise. Again, it's going to be a collaborative effort. So
Awesome.
I'm proud of these guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Ms. Roscoe? Anything else? Thank you very much.
Just an update, sir.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So we move on to item number 4, revised policy on investments, since we've got the investment training.
Yes, sir. We actually have Mr. Baum that will present the majority of this. We are seeking the opportunity to present this and also take it before the board, as we had previously had discussions about revising our policy on investments, and it just really ties along. You've had some time to also process it, so we welcome questions after the presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just a couple of things. Y'all know that in board policy there is legal policy and there's local policy, and we have no discretion over legal policy. Well, as it relates to CDA legal, there are 18 pages of CDA legal regarding investment policy that we cannot change. And then we flip the script and go to our local policy, and we've got 8 pages. So we've got a total of 26 pages governing our investment activity. And we've got our money sitting in pools, right? And as the auditor noted, we've got it sitting in essentially a single pool. We weren't positioned horribly being in a single pool, but we were in violation of policy that we set forth. And within an investment pool, there is money from district after district after district that's combined, and then they invest that nationally. They buy U.S. Treasuries, they buy T-bills, they buy T-bonds, they buy all kinds of things that fit the investment objectives of that pool. So it wasn't that we weren't diversified. We were certainly legal, we just were out of compliance with our policy. But I wanted to make a few suggestions regarding our local policy. The first of which, and y'all have a copy of this in your packets. I know it was uploaded.
I don't think we're done.
Would you like a hard copy of that? No. You, Mr. Vasquez?
And again,
I have it on here.
we will ensure that you have a copy of this. My apologies for not bringing, but I didn't want to run through 80 pages of prep. We'd already done it on the others. But one of the things that I am recommending that we change regarding our policy, and I'll just paraphrase it, the district can choose to appoint, subject to y'all's approval, an investment advisor. As long as we have the expertise, the time, talent, and fortitude on site to do that, there's no reason to outsource that. But in the event that we feel that we are lacking in that area, or we may want to try a differentiated approach, it would allow us to reach out to an outside investment advisor. Not my recommendation, but from a policy standpoint, I think it makes sense to provide the nimbleness, if you will, for us to go that direction if we ever should choose so. But again, that investment advisor that would be appointed would be at y'all's approval. So you're not just turning over the keys to the kingdom to somebody. You would entertain individuals and would approve them at that time. But I think that's a necessary piece of the investment policy. As we move on and talk about scope, it's on page 2 of 8. It says, this policy shall apply to all financial assets of the district. I don't think it gets more comprehensive than that. If this applies to all financial assets of the district, we can stop right there. And we go on ad nauseum and talk about all the different funds. We know what those are. Those are held in policy and statute. It just spreads this investment policy out. I don't think it's necessary. Again, that's a recommended striking. It's not anything that you have to do. The next item is on liquidity and maturity. It currently reads that we can have that we shall have a maximum dollar weighted maturity of 180 days. And also the individual investments owned by the district shall not exceed 1 year. Well, if we were talking about the average weighted maturity in a portfolio of 180 days, that is really, really compressed. That gives us half a year of timeline to work with investments. In an environment such as this, it's not critical. If you look at a yield curve, and what a yield curve is essentially the rate that you get as you extend your investment term out. If you've got a steepening yield curve and you're getting, at least half or more of the rate of return for a 2-year investment that you do a 1-year investment, then you look at laddering some of those things out. If you're in a volatile market, that's when you start seeing the steepening yield curve. We've got a very flat yield curve right now, and to reach out and lock our money up for 2 years instead of just 1 year, or 3 years instead of just 1 year, it's not the most prudent decision today. But as that yield curve steepens, and it's not the same. It's not the same all the time. But if we got in a situation, and we will, where we want to take advantage of longer term rates, we want to ladder our CDs to where we are, talking about our fund balance and the amount of money that we have, there's no reason to have all of that at the ready. We're never going to spend $50 million in a single transaction, right? But we've got our money hugely liquid, and it's costing us a little bit of our rate. So we need to ladder our portfolio out, and that's why we made the recommendations that we have. We will come to you at a future point with our asset allocation as to where we're recommending putting things. But we need policy in place that will allow us to do that before we go down that road. And I look for us to make, in collaboration, other recommendations as we go. But the liquidity and the maturity, number one principle in investing school funds is return of the money. It's not return on the money. So we're always going to have a secure environment. But if we don't need it tomorrow, then we need to extend our maturities out and get a better return. So that's why we've asked for the flexibility there. On the diversity, page 3 of 8, this is the one that I had the greatest challenge with. And there's a lot of investments on here listed that this district will probably never use a repurchase agreement. This district will probably never use commercial paper. But there are just some targets on here. The money market account is a 10% maximum currently written into law. If our bank were to come down and say, we'll give you 150 basis points, and that's more than the 100 basis points the pools are giving us, we'd make that shift. And when money is at the bank, it is collateralized beyond the value. And when money is in CDs, it's collateralized beyond the value. So it's not at risk, but we just need to be able to take advantage. And this seemed very arbitrary, very capricious as to how these amounts were included. But as y'all are reviewing the investment policy on a not less than quarterly basis, these are the things that we need to be calling attention to see what the composition of our portfolio is. If we're sitting all in the pools, it's an easy conversation. Other than the fact that it's currently written that we can't have more than half of it in a single pool. And as we started talking about moving money around, we realized there were some restrictions on who was on account. So it was an opportunity to improve, but it isn't every day. There's always an opportunity to improve. So as it relates to diversity, the investment portfolio should be diversified in terms of investment instruments, maturity scheduling, and financial institutions to reduce the risk of loss resulting from over-concentration of assets in a specific class of investment, specific maturity, or specific issuer. I don't feel like we need specificity beyond that to say that we can only have 10% in the money market or we can only have 50% in the CD. Again, just a recommendation. Page 4 of 8 and 5 of 8 has to do with the investment objectives for the particular funds. Again, we are saying that this policy applies to all financial assets of the district. So to get into differentiation between trust and custodial funds and activity funds and operating funds, our investment objectives are going to be the same, but it's going to be based on when we're going to need the money. If we've got long-term bond money sitting there that we're not spending, we don't need to be able to reach into the bank and grab it tomorrow if we're going to be penalized for rate. But it's about a prudent standard of care to ensure that we're investing the money in accordance with what the objective should be. And there's just not the levels of differentiation. They're just not necessary, as I see. But that's it in a nutshell. That would cut our local policy down from 8 pages to about 5 pages. It would provide flexibility of investing in the portfolio. But again, those investments are going to be run by y'all on both a pre-implementation basis and an ongoing basis. So we're required by law to review this policy, and it's not a rubber stamp that we just, there were just some things in here that we needed to add and some things that we needed to remove. So be happy to answer any questions and help any way I can.
Committee members, do we have any questions regarding the proposed amended investment policy?
I think so. We're getting our quarterly investment reports anyway, so whatever changes you're making in the pools, that will show up in our next quarterly
Yes,
report.
absolutely it will. But as we talk about investment allocation, we may reach out to local banks and say, what would you give us on a 2-year CD? And if their 2-year CD rate is the same as a pool, there's no sense in tying it up for 2
Right.
years. But if it well exceeds that of a pool or their money market, my investment portfolio was with the district's investment portfolio was with a local bank, and their money market rate was higher than what anybody else would give us for a CD because they were competing for the business, and we were an important client of theirs. And so you have to take advantage of those situations.
Sure.
I
Okay.
entirely agree with that. Mrs. Lawson? Good. Okay. And Ms. Adejo, is it your
Yes, sir.
recommendation that we accept the?
Please,
approval?
yes. Again, we had the opportunity to receive just some additional insight of how we can move forward. The goal, as you recall, also last committee meeting was to come before you to share what opportunities are available for us and the flexibility of gains. So that will come prior to
Work in progress.
as well, yes. So it's an ongoing that we would want to keep coming back to. So that it's not just the quarterly report every single time that you get.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Well, committee members, without objection, we'll move this, recommend approval by the full board. No objections. So we will move on to item number 6, updated revenue projection.
Mr. Rodriguez, go ahead. Either way. I was just going to share with you, it was a combination, and I do believe Dr. Gropel did point that out, so it was a combination between what the budget amendment information stated to provide everyone with an update.
Right.
If there's anything that we need to clear on this end for comments? No.
Good. Any questions? So we'll move on to the next item then. Number 7, update on the budget calendar.
Yes, sir. We do have some updates. Another just a conversation that we've had there is to bring the budget calendar before our committee every 6 weeks, whether there is a change or not, just so that we can ensure that we are hitting the ideal timeline. One in particular, and I know Jeff will speak to it was the initial package for our department leads, training that will come along with that. We feel strongly that we're in a good place to make that adjustment and still fulfill the calendar timeline. Jeff?
Yes, I wish in retrospect that we had created two separate calendars, one specific to this year and one specific to the out years, in a perfect world, because we're gonna reach perfection as it relates to our budget process. I promise you we are. But maybe we were a bit over exuberant as we scheduled these deadlines out. And we talked about it last time. There were several things that have already passed that needed to be done. If I could touch on the January 22nd date to approve the fund balance assignments. If you as a board end up setting fund balance policies and make it a practice every year during, say, January, just after the first of the year, to make fund balance assignments, that will correspond with our audit, because our audit is always presented in January. And even though we're doing that work in January, that would allow us to reach back into the audit and correct it, so we have these dollars allocated. So we talk about fund balance policy and what's a good amount to have. Okay, 3 months we're saying is a sound practice. Well, if you've got 3 months, that's operating expenses. If you're saving money to build a campus or to build a central office or a professional development center or a fleet of buses or whatever, then you can earmark those monies, and it really gives you the opportunity to have that fund balance allocation wrapped tight and know there's always a plan. We know there's districts, Dr. Gropel spoke of, Dr. Gropel on my left-hand side. He spoke of districts that he's seen and had 12 months of fund balance. Well, you can be strategic and plan for those things, but it's hard for the public or the state to attack you regarding your fund balance if you have plans for it. If you've got just a ton of cash sitting there, it's easy to say, well, you got more money than you need. But if we've got plans, if we're trying to avoid, issuance of debt for a particular project, then earmark that to the side. But it would be a great practice if the district would get into the practice of doing that, say in January. So just a little bit on the approval of fund balance assignments there. Same thing with approving the reappropriations from the year prior. This will get to be our culture. This will get to be our practice that we follow these things. But we've got a date established now, a recommended date of March the 24th. And again, this is going to, it's cliche that this is a living, breathing document, but it really is. The principals are anxious through conversation with Ms. Sandejo. Department heads are anxious to get their budget packets, but they see that as an opportunity because they've never really, I can't say never because we don't know, but current staff has not been asked a lot to allocate resources and to plan the resources. Okay, so if you are a campus principal, each and every year, you and yours are responsible for doing a campus improvement plan. And Campus A's improvement plan does not look like Campus B's, does not look like Campus C's. So how is it that their resources should all be the same? The students, we know we've got high incidence of low socioeconomic status students, but that still is not to say that every student in every campus looks the same. So we need to develop a process by which we can fund students based on their characteristics because the state is funding us based on those characteristics. So we need to be able to differentiate, but also provide discretionary funds at the campus level for them to have their initiatives. Everybody's got accountability. Everybody has somebody that answers to. We all have a boss. But that's what those budget packets look like. And so, we sit down and Ms. Seaman and other staff will talk to them about what does their staffing look like? What is the state of the district? Not from a 50,000 State of the Union, but what are the nuts and bolts? Because those campus principals, they're future superintendents, they're future executive directors. We need to be making a leadership investment in them, and they need to have a decision regarding their expenditures of money. Again, they can't do it in isolation. We need to use CPOCs. We need to use site-based committees. They need to have a collaborative approach to where everybody feels good about it. And it's not just money that gets spent. Nobody has trouble spending money, we know that.
They always want more.
But let's target our expenditures, let's target our staff, and it's a finite resource, no question about it. Let's put it in the best spot, let's feel good about it, let's rock on it. So that is the purpose of distributing those budget packets. But it's not, we're not gonna reach into another district and get their budget packet and say, here, it's gonna be a South San packet. And we hope that it's good enough that others want it. We're not giving it to them, so. But, so we're in the process of developing that, and there are, you know, we've talked about staff, and Jim Collins talks about having the, you know, the right people on the bus and the right seats on the bus. We've got the right people, we still got some empty seats. We've got to get, you know, we've got to get the bus full. And so we are working on that, we're collaborating, and it's not this is, you know, anybody's individual plan, this is district things. And then we just carry through the dates, and I think it was Ms. Sandejo maybe that was talking earlier, and pardon me if it was not. But by the time we get to the end of April, the first part of May, we're on lockdown. We are on cruise control as to where we go in. There is no variance. But right now, we are working on the priority of the day, whether it's recoding staffing, whether it's verifying staffing, whether it's getting these budget amendments. It's all hands on deck, and we are going to get to the point to where we're smooth and caught up. And the next budget cycle is when we're really shine.
And we will have the South San budget process, as he said. It won't be Southwest, won't be any of those other inferior districts, it'll just be the South San ISD budget process.
Yes, sir.
And if we're not around here anymore, make me one promise, you'll review it every year to make it better. Because if you don't, it's not gonna get it better. It's gonna get a little worse. But great report, Jim. Thanks.
Committee members, are there any questions about the budget calendar? Well, I just want to say thank you. I think it's exciting that we're including the campuses and the campus staff to have some say on, you know, building what their budget, what they would like it to look like, right? So, but you know, making them feel included and having some input, I think will go a long way. And I have to say, I'll just make from a community member standpoint, a dad who has kids in middle school, I think that's phenomenal from the standpoint of allowing the athletic coaches at the middle school to have a say in what uniforms they can buy for their soccer team, for the basketball team. I think they would appreciate that. Not give them a blank check, or, you know, but say, hey, here's how much you can spend, and here's the catalog. You get what you get on.
It's our responsibility, in conjunction with the board, really the board's responsibility in conjunction with staff, to say how much can be spent. That's okay.
Right.
That's your calling. But how you spend it on what your work is, I don't know.
Right.
You don't know, I would submit, for consideration. They do, are they better?
Yeah.
You're going to have to take personnel action to free up their future. But we have to give them input into what's going on.
Right. My first year to teach and coach, I went to the superintendent, small school, and I asked for 12 basketballs. He said, Coach Baum, you can have 6.
All right. That's what I want.
No, I hadn't got there yet.
Oh,
I went and asked for 24 pairs of socks. He said, you can have 12. When it came time for track spikes, I counted my kids at double. Every one of them had new shoes, so there you
In
go.
Dallas, we call that brokering of the system.
Yeah, that's
They have a book on.
Right.
Mr. Rodriguez, just
Yes,
to
ma'am.
make note for our governance body, and as we continue providing the updates on the teacher incentive allotment and the documents that were provided, as well as the budget calendar, revised calendar, that will also be sent out to the rest of our board.
Yes, ma'am.
We will not, because of course these are up for consideration of approval, is number 2 and number 4. So just, I mean, that's an opportunity as well to continue growing the rest of our governance body
Yes, ma'am.
from each committee meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Agreed.
So you'll see it double.
Gotcha. Okay.
How are we doing on the facilities?
Oh, we haven't had. I haven't seen Dr. Gilchrist. He's been out in, with, who's he with?
Oh, he was with, who did he say that he saw? He was at Disney World.
Captain Hook.
Yeah, Captain Hook.
So we haven't,
I
seen
saw him at Disney World. I'm not making any more comments.
Right. No, I know we have to do the facilities committee as well, so we'll work on that. I'll get together with Dr. Lopez and see what the composition should be on that. But I suspect that's not going to be a small committee.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
Okay. If there aren't any other items, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you for your